Hi friends, it's Becky, and today I want to make a necklace using some of the beads that I got in the Dollar Bead Box for October of 2024. And so my idea with this was to use some of these check beads and make a beaded chain necklace that's kind of a lariat style, kind of asymmetry. So I'm going to make a little loop with my wire, and then we're going to make a focal with some of these beads with some little dangles. So I'll show that to you as we do it. I went ahead and made part of this chain because it does take a long time to make the links and then to link them together. It was something that I did last night after work, and so I have some links that are already ready to go and part of it that's already strung. And so this part of my chain, you can see I use these Druk beads, these little 4mm ones, and then we've got our check glass bicones. They're this aqua blue color. These are the two beads that I'm using in this chain. And then for this one, I'm going to be using these check flower beads, and I've already put them on the wire, and we just haven't connected them yet. I'm also going to use a couple of these bicones, and then these like travertine finish pinch beads. They're really fun. So we're going to have those on the other side because this is asymmetrical. So this side will have the smaller beads, and then the other side will have the larger beads. And then for my focal part, we're going to be using some of the beads that came in the bead mix. It was this metallic copper bead mix. There's this large nuggety bead, and then a couple of these spike beads. So we're going to have those be some dangles, and I'll show you how to put all of those together. The wire that I'm using for this is some 22 gauge bright copper non-tarnish wire. So we're going to be using those to make all of our links, to make the focal. And it's not going to have a clasp because it is going to be a lariat style necklace, so it'll just go overhead. So we're just going to use the wire that we've got here. For my wire working tools, I'm going to be using a round nose pliers. I've got some chain nose pliers. These are longer chain nose pliers, and I really like these casual comfort tools. They make it so that I can actually do a lot of wire working and little small details like this without having a lot of strain on my wrists. Last year when I did my beaded chain challenge for September, near the end of the month, that's when I started looking at some newer tools that would help me do it for longer, because I was starting to feel some strain in my hands from all of the wire wrapping, repeated movements, doing all of those things. And that's when I first evaluated these, and I've been using them for a year, and they're really my favorite tools. They fit in your hand really well. You don't have to do very large movements to squeeze them, and I made it all the way through September doing beaded chains for almost all of my videos using these tools, and I haven't had any hand strain. So I can highly recommend these. I'll put links to these to all the tools that I'm using in the description below, including the bead mat that I use, these flush cutters that I'm using, which is going to be used to cut the wire, and also a link to the Dollar Bead Box. If you wanted to look at subscribing, it is one of the most economical bead boxes out there, and you get high quality check glass for really low prices. It's definitely worth it, in my opinion, to be able to do that. So let's get started. I'll show you how I make my links. I left a couple of beads that still needed to be made into links out so that we could do those together. And I think it was this one. Well, we'll do a couple, I think. So again, using 22 gauge wire, I should say, not 20 gauge. And so about 2.5 inches from the top of that, of the end of my wire, I'm going to make a little bend. And this is so that when I make my loop afterwards, it will be centered over the middle of that wire. Then I'm just going to push the wire over the top of my loop, open up my pliers and rotate it so that it's out of the way, so I can have that cross over the front like a scarf on my, my little guy. And that's the first round part of my first loop. And now these are wrapped loops. You can see the wraps on these. And I like to use wrapped loops when I use 22 gauge wire because 22 gauge can be a little bit bendy. It's easy to bend, which is one of the reasons that I'm just using my fingers to push this wire around the neck of this. We're going to do 3 wraps. But it does mean that when you do a loop with it, if you do a simple loop with 22 gauge copper wire, it can come undone fairly. Doesn't take a lot of effort. But with the wrapped loop, it's more secure. And it makes for a longer link as well. So with these, I have been doing one end wrapped initially, and then we put our bead on. And you'll want to hold your wire just above the bead and bend that over. And that gives you some room on the other side of it so that when you have your loop, you'll have somewhere to wrap your wire for the second wrap. And then we bring our wire over the top, rotate the pliers, bring it around, and this is where I usually leave it, but I make sure that I leave enough wire for wrapping after. And that way, with one of the loops undone, I can put this together, I can assemble it. So let's start with one end of the chain, and let's just start putting these guys together. I'm going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I think I've enough of those and some of those, and I think these will be for our focals and the loop on the end. So let's put the rest of our chain together. I'm just gonna lay it out in the order that I want it to be in, so I don't accidentally connect something out of order when I do this. Oh no, that's gonna be there. I want my blue guys. This one. Those, whoops, the other way. Yeah, because I don't want to connect the wrong things, is what I'm trying to get at here. One more of these blue flowers. And then this, and that, and then, okay, yeah. So that's the end. This one is going to be the one that I have my large loop on, and that's going to be right here on the end. So we'll make that after we get the rest of these connected. So you can connect them as you make them, but I like doing it kind of make each part of that link and then connect them afterwards. Because if I connect them while I'm making them, invariably I always forget to connect it before I start my second wrap. It's just something that I do. And it's something that I think a few people do. I'm going to scooch in just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. I have my open loop attached to one end of my chain. I'm going to hold on to it so that I keep my pliers out of the way. And again, because this is a dead soft wire, it's very easy to maneuver. In some ways it can be sometimes easy to over maneuver. So I'm just using my fingers, and I left this a little bit longer so that I would have leverage with my finger and not have to push really hard on it. You can use pliers to wrap it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I find I don't need it, but if you do, go ahead and do that. Sometimes I do need to use pliers if I don't have a long enough thing to get good leverage to wrap it around with my fingers. Or if it's fairly stiff wire, sometimes I need that. And so there we go. I've got that link finished and connected to that end of my chain. So then I'm just going to grab my next guy, put that through that loop, and you can just pop it on there. Sometimes it helps if you can't get that wire through there. You can kind of open this like you do a jump ring by swinging it open and then swing it closed afterwards. That's just a little trick that you can do with that. So I'm going to just put the rest of these guys together with you. Sometimes it's helpful to watch things again a couple of times, especially if you are following along or trying to get the hang of it or how your fingers and hands should go. I'm just tucking the end of this wire in with my pliers. That's all I'm doing right here. There we go. Just to tighten that up so I don't have a pokey outy bit. I know that watching hand movements of somebody doing something can be really helpful for learning those hand movements yourself. I know that one of the things that I used to love watching was my mom crocheting. Just watching her hand movements, how she maneuvered the hook into the work and into what she's doing. And I found that when I started crocheting, I was doing the exact same hand movements. And I know hand movements can be different from one person to the other, but because I had spent so long watching her hands go, when I started making the same hand movements, it just felt like the natural way for me to do it because that had been reinforced from watching so much. So I'm just going to finish putting the rest of these together so you can watch this with me, and maybe you can hang out with me while you're working on your projects, or we can just enjoy a little bit of company together. I know for a lot of my YouTube friends, you enjoy spending time with me while I'm making things, and I am so grateful that you do because I enjoy spending time making them with you. Just move that out of the way a little bit. Anyway, I really love this bead box this month. It had a bunch of like fall colors, but then we've got all these little pops of light blue in there with it, just to bring some extra color into it. There's quite a few other things that I am sort of thinking about making with it in addition to this, but this was the thing that I really wanted to make. And it's been a couple of weeks since I've done any beaded chains. As I mentioned before, did it for the entire month of September. And so I needed a little break from that. I did some bead weaving projects recently. They were a lot of fun to make. And then I did some stringing projects. And so my projects going forward will be a combination. We'll have some bead weaving, we'll have some stringing, we'll have some wire working, because these are all fun things that I enjoy doing. We're probably going to be doing a lot of silver silk projects. I think it's next week, because they're having a little challenge in the Silver Silk Silkies group. And if you haven't seen silver silk stuff, if you're new to my channel and haven't seen all of the things that I do, it's a fine gauge wire that has been knitted, and then it is either knitted and flat or knitted and hollow, or knitted around some rubber tubing, or knitted around leather, or knitted around some ball chain to make a different type of chain that can be used in your stuff. But there's, in the Facebook group for that product, they're doing a challenge next week, so I am going to be doing a couple of those, and I think that should be lots of fun to do. And probably use some in one of my projects that I'm planning on with this box. I'm sorry, sometimes you have to stop and admire your work. So that's what I'm doing right now. I am stopping to admire my work. And now I'm going to move on. I think that's an important part of a process. Sometimes you'll be working on something and you can't really appreciate it until you step back and look at how it looks. And sometimes when you do that, you'll find ways that you can improve it. Or you'll find yourself encouraging yourself to continue because you like the way it's going and you want to keep going and finish some more of that. You know, when I'm knitting like lace, especially when I have to stop and admire my work, I have to spread it out so that I can actually see my lace patterns. But that's always so satisfying when you do spread it out in your fingers and you can see what you've been making, and it looks so pretty. And so it's the same thing with this. I will stop and look at how things are coming together. And usually I'm very pleased with it. You know, sometimes it can be hard to be able to compliment yourself and say, you know what, I'm actually good at this. But it's okay to admit it, that you are good at what you're doing. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with being proud of the work that you do. Nothing wrong with that at all. Right. Sometimes it's easy to feel like an imposter, to think, oh, I'm not an expert, or I'm not the best at this. But you know what? As long as you are having fun creating and making things that you enjoy, you don't have to be an expert. You can keep doing things that you enjoy doing. Nobody is going to come along and say you can't do these if you don't have the qualifications for it. The only qualification that you need is the desire to create. That's the only qualification. The rest will come. Alright, so I think I've got all of my links connected. The next bits will be the loop that the other side will go through for this lariat, and then the big bobbly bit that I'm going to make with these guys. Just double check. I'm going to scooch out just a little bit so we can see more of this. So this is definitely what I had drawn. This one half here, our flower beads and our pinch beads. And then we have this other half here. And I just want to make sure that when it is, I'm just picking it up and putting it over my head to make sure that when it is, yes, it is something that can go over the head when these two ends are together. If it wasn't going to be long enough, and this will extend it a little bit as well, then I would definitely need to add a few more links onto the end, which would not be hard to do because I, like I said, I like making links all together, and I kind of went a little bit link crazy and made a whole bunch of them. That's okay, I can make a bracelet with those. And they just haven't been put together yet. Alright. Now, think about how I want to put the rest of this together. I want to make my loop last, I think, but I'm going to want to make this part with some dangles off the end of here. Let's get some more wire for that. And why don't I, since this hole is going to be fairly straight through here and not curved, I think the best thing for me to do would be to bend it like that to give myself an actual angle. Stick this onto my wire on this end, and then bend this up here. I'm just gonna pinch this in a little bit in that direction, and this one too, in that direction. We'll do this again after I do this first one. This is me figuring it out. All right. There we go. So that's where it's going to cross over. Hold on to that bit and then use this to wrap around that core. Just going to do 3 wraps like that. Give that a clip, and then let's see, how about one of those or both of those? Yeah. One, two, and then we'll need a loop above that. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the others and begin making that loop. Like this. But I'm not going to do the second wrap. And let's see, I'm going to just do different beads, maybe different combinations of beads, maybe just one of these on that one and 2 of those together on the next, so they're a little bit different. Yeah, different is good. Different is fantastic. Differences are what makes people and things so interesting, because if everything's the same, how boring would it be? There we go. Bending it up. Crossing there. I'm just using my fingernail there. Let's just use my fingers. That didn't give me as crisp of a connection as the other way. So we'll use it with the pliers on my next one that I do. I'm just playing around, seeing which ones work better for me. Right, and then we're going to need another loop after I put on a singular guy. Then one more. Okay. Wanted another sharp bend. Put this guy on here. Hold that firm while I get another sharp bend up here. And bend that here. And then this one as well. Boom. Yeah, I like that. That gives me a sharper bend. It's not super sharp, but it's sharp enough that I know where the bend is. 1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna smush my coils up to tighten them up a little bit. Right. And then 2 of these guys. Ooh, you know what? Why don't I put something between each of these from here in the box? Because I think I might have had some smaller beads that might go with it. Yeah, one of these triangle-y types. I think that's a good idea, yes. Let's pop that right up there. And then this one. I know I still have all of this wire over here. That's okay. Because what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut that there. And now I'm going to wrap this, and then I'm going to start building kind of a cluster with this and my other 3 dangles so that they are dangling from each other instead of from a central thing. So I'm going to get that guy wrapped and then take my single bead dangle and connect it to that right there. And then wrap that. Alright, and before I connect that 3rd one, I'm going to want another loop to connect it to. That is part of this, and I think I want maybe to add a couple more beads to that. In fact, let's grab a couple of those, because you know there are so many of those in the box that I can do that. Sorry, that's too many things on my desk. Okay, so I'm going to have these guys, and so I'm going to make a wrapped loop here. And this can be closed because I'm going to be using this one to attach my dangles to it. It'll be the bottom of my large focal bead. So let's put this trick on there. My large nugget. And then this bead right there. And now let's make ourselves another loop. With this one. going to wait to connect to here until after I've made my other loop. There we go. That'll work. But now I'm going to use this and connect that to also this. So I want both of those things on there. So I've got my big bead, I've got these two dangles that are already connected, and they're all going to be connected to this one here. Alright, so it's a little bit of a cluster. Let's move those out of the way so that they are not in the way while I'm doing my wrapping. Oh my gosh, you know what? Round nose pliers are not as effective as chain nose pliers for tucking in this end. Just pro tip. Round nose pliers won't do it as well. There we go. So now these will just dangle like that from the bottom of this. Love that. I'm going to wait to connect that until after I've created my loop on this end so that I can make sure that the loop will go through there. Alright, so I'm going to want a loop that is large enough that these might go through. This one. Alright. So let's do a loop. I'm going to use the largest part of my round nose pliers, go all the way around. Maybe even just not very tight. Like that. Hold on to it and make myself a wrapped loop right there. Before I do anything else, I'm going to see if these beads will slide through, and they do. Perfect. I want this loop to stay circular, so I'm going to use my chain nose pliers and give it a smush. And what that does is it work hardens that loop. You could also use some nylon jaw pliers. You could use a hammer and a bench block. I find I just need to give it a smush with my chain nose pliers, and then I've got myself a nice little loop there. Alright, now for the other side, I'm going to make myself a smaller loop that I'm going to attach to this end of my chain. Let's wrap this. Alright, and now I'm going to put this through this loop before I attach this focal that I made, because the focal is too big to fit through the loop. But I want the free movement up and down the chain from that loop that I just made. So let's get this part wrapped now that that's been attached. And we have a completed necklace. Alright. This catches a little bit, but again, it will not come apart. And now I have my beaded chain necklace. It's asymmetrical, and it is a lariat style. Once again, I made this with the Dollar Bead Box for October, and again, I'll have links to my tools. I'll have links to Dollar Bead Box. There is a coupon code you can use to get $2 off of your first box, or $2 off of their sister store where you can buy everything for $1. Which, like, is, I don't know how they do it, because nothing is $1 anymore. And there we go. I am really happy with this. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you see, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And until next time, happy beading.